What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Onset podcast. And I get it. You're sitting there at home. You're there with your camera. You're about to take your headphones off. You're like, I've listened to 3 of these podcasts with these guys so far, and I've got no idea how to work my camera at all. What is to go with these settings? I've got no idea whatsoever. Well, okay, just chill. Today we're going over the camera basics 101. Steve and myself, we're going to be breaking it all down for you guys. So put your headphones back on. Don't slam that camera up against that brick wall. We've got you. How are we going, Steve?
Good, man. Good. How you going?
I'm good. We've all been there, though, when we first got that camera and you're like, I've got no idea what's to go with any of this. What is ISO? More like, I don't know. Shutter speed, you got no idea about.
You sound like a
and you
rapper.
just want to peg it. That's it. Dropping that EP soon.
Yeah,
But
that's it. No, you're right, mate. Like it is. It's a daunting task. Like there's a lot of want to be professional photographers that picking up cameras and spending a lot of money on this on different products and just getting started is hard to get your head around it. But once you do and you start shooting photos in the manual mode, it makes for your camera to be more versatile, I think. Yeah.
100%. We've spoken about in previous episodes how your skill level and just your experience goes, as I said before, like tenfold, especially once you start to dive into all those settings instead of just shooting everything auto. Because I get it, when you get that new camera, everything looks amazing, especially when you get like a new lens and everything. You're like, damn, I don't even need to tweak these settings at all. It's just so good just out of the gates.
Yep.
But as you start to dive into that, yeah, your skill level starts to, as I said, increase so much. So
Yeah. I was just talking to someone late yesterday actually, and he was just trying to get his head around it. He's bought a new camera and he's obviously just shooting away in auto. But he was just like, oh, why are my images so blurry? And and he's just shooting his kids and dogs and all that kind of stuff. But kids and dogs don't exactly stand still for you. So I'm pretty sure that auto, that shutter speed is probably not where he should have it. But yeah, I know. I think that's something that we need to dive into and talk a little bit about that and those differences. But yeah, I don't know about you, mate. But yeah, I don't know, shooting sports or anything like that, the difference between that and shooting portraits is, obviously a huge difference.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I feel like we will end up making a couple of these videos, especially just back to the basics or like the drawing boards, just to be able to break down, because there's so much of information to unpack, especially just in one episode. You want to end up being able to get into like almost like each topic enough where it's not like I'm just skimming over things for people. So
Oh yeah, yeah. It does take a bit, but yeah, I don't know. If we want to just start with, I don't know, shutter speed. I don't know. Is that something that you probably want to start with?
Yeah, we can start with shutter speed.
So if we were gonna
So
go.
So
mate.
if you were to break it down to a beginner, guy on the street just picked up that camera. He's left the bedroom. He's got his headphones still on. Just finished listening to one of our podcasts, and he comes up to you. He sees you. He's like, "Mate, what's shutter speed? What's the go with it?"
What is shutter speed? Yeah. Well, really, when you talk about frames per second, if you're talking about video or photos, for instance, the human eye, your standard eye, is focused at 24 frames a second. So, say this here, moving my hand across like this, 24 frames a second. You can see it moving. There's not much blur. There's no blur. But if we were to shoot at a lower shutter speed, obviously that creates blur for video and for photos, and so that's why you'll see that you're using a low shutter speed. You're using something. Your shutter speed's too low to be able to shoot sports, because there's a lot of movement. So you need to bump your shutter speed up to be able to capture that movement. And that's really the ins and outs of shutter speed is basically that. But there is a big difference between video and photo. I know that, but
But
It's
if I want to take a video, Steve, and I want to slow it right down, what type of shutter speed do you think I should be playing with?
well, yeah, that's it. Then you're looking at something a bit different where you want to have your shutter speed right up, because you want more frames per second. So when you slow it right down, you're using more frames. You're getting more of that consistent slowness, if that's my technical term for it. But no, I
Consistent.
know consistent slowness. So if you don't have consistent slowness, when you slow your video down, you'll get that stutter because you haven't got
That choppy.
enough frames for it to move slowly through the video. So I don't
Mm.
know. Yeah, but so like it does vary. So basically you work on if your camera is recording at, say, 60 frames a second, then you need to set your camera for 120 frames a second. So you want to double it at what you're recording at. So if you're recording at 30, you want your camera to be set at 60 frames. And it's close
Mm.
to double whatever you're recording at. So that's the basics around that. And then obviously in post when you go to slow it down, then you'll be able to get that nice smooth slow motion.
That's perfect, Steve. That's
Thank you very
perfect.
much.
That's it.
uh,
I feel like that person just had a bit of a masterclass right there that came up to you just then. So
oh,
that's
oh,
it.
like, and then we can dive into a lot more, but like then you've got shooting videos in the daylight. If you're wanting to shoot at 24 frames and a low aperture, then
Mm.
that's probably the next thing that we could probably move into is aperture.
100%.
So
100%.
so aperture is how much light's being let into your lens, and the lower the number. And probably the easiest way to think about it is when you see photos with a blurry background or bokeh. That's kind of it's a low aperture shot. So lenses vary from 1.4 f-stop or aperture. Like it depends what you want to call it really.
What's slang?
That's it. So it goes from 1.4 and you can go right up to 22 or 24, whatever. But then shooting a photo at anything really, it depends on how far away the background is to the subject. But if you're looking at a standard portrait, 50 on a 50 mil focal length, and you have anything from probably 5.6 aperture or higher, then you'll really be able to see what's in the background of that image.
Mm.
Anything lower, then it gets blurrier and blurrier and blurrier, or there's more bokeh. So
It's pretty much comes down to how much of it you want to be in focus. That's just
yes,
like the basics of it. Is that, as you said, when you're shooting like landscape, you want to be able to see like all those details in that whole what's in the frame right there. Like if it's like either mountains, bit of foreground, you want to end up being able to capture all that in focus.
yeah,
Whereas when we're doing a lot more kind of wedding photography in that, is that it's to have that more kind of dynamic range, but like between the foreground and like the background, is that you want to end up making them stand out more. So that's when we start to lower that f-stop down,
yeah,
and we start to play with those those twos and sometimes those ones, just be able to end up having them almost attract that viewer's eye even more, make them stand out more prominent, make that sharper differentiation between
yeah,
them and the rest.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And it's very depending on every different shot you take. Like I know what you're talking about with like shooting at night and having lights in the background. Like you really want to get that aperture right down. It lets more light into the lens, which means that you less grain as well, and less, and then it really blows out that background. sorry, not blowout, but that bokeh that is really really blurred, and it just gives a beautiful image that way. But then at the same time, if you shoot a bride and their wedding party is behind them, you don't want it to be too blurry that you can still kind of see who that is behind them. So yeah,
It's one of those things that with experience you end up starting to juggle and be able to just, quickly get to, instead of just being like, what should I use here?
yeah,
And so it's just one of those things that gets a lot quicker. And that's with all the settings.
yep,
I remember it was like months on end where that thought process of like, oh, how do I get it to do this? Or how do I get it to do that? Or I'm shooting, as you said, like a sports shot. Oh, how do I want my things to be? And it's like legit all of a sudden it just clicks one day. And then you just find yourself just automatically going straight to it. So it's just one of those things that if you're just getting started, it's one of those things that we said in the first episode is that just get out there, just muck around with it, learn your camera, learn the settings, just practice different times of day, different lighting, different types of shots. If you want it to be like a real low f-stop, to be able to capture something in that point of view, or if you want it to end up being like a real landscape shot right there. So just get out and about.
Yeah, and if you combine both those together, when it comes to like photo and video, you're moving into something else. It's it's the same topic, but if you're shooting a low aperture and you're needing a low shutter speed, then you're letting in so much light into your camera that it'll what they call blow out your image, and that's when you've got to look at using an ND filter on the front of your lens to be able to it's what ND filters are basically like sunglasses for your lens. Yeah, that's
Stop
it.
it.
That's
Stop
it.
And right there.
And so that's where you'll find like you want to take a nice portrait outside, so you want your aperture right down, that lets in a lot of light, that you'll need to bump up your shutter speed right up to kind of cope with that light coming in, to be able to darken the photo a bit more. But
That's it.
yeah, see that, and that's achievable with photography, but it's not achievable through video, because you can't. That you got to go back to that basic rule of doubling what you're recording, and that's as far as you can go. So if you're recording at 24 frames, then your shutter speed needs to be 50, and that's as high as you can go. Otherwise, it's you're gonna wreck that video. So that's where the ND filter is priceless, really, when it comes to shooting video.
100%, because you don't want to end up risking that image quality. Especially if you want everything to look real sharp and real nice, is that you don't want them being like, feeling like you have to crank that f-stop all the way up to, like 15 or whatever, just to get a bit more darkness in there.
Yep, definitely.
So, definitely. Get yourself an ND filter.
Yep.
That's it.
That's right.
Before camera, just get it and just have it waiting, because you never know when you'll need it.
It's not that important. It's not that important. No. But if you're shooting photography, then just wait on that. But they aren't expensive. Like, look, you're looking at probably from $50 up. Jordan's favourite mate, Peter McKinnon's selling one for about $300. So
that's it. My best friend, my mentor.
Good mate.
That's it. Good mate.
But they are that's exceptional ND filter, that. But but they do range. You can range from 50 to $300 odd dollars. So depending on what your budget is these days.
That's it.
Definitely.
Thirdly, so we've gone over shutter speed. We've gone over aperture. ISO, Steve.
ISO.
What is it? ISO.
ISO. Well, ISO is like I would probably put it down as your digital lighting to your camera.
Artificial.
Artificial is a better word. Artificial light. So what happens with that is you got to be very careful, is that, obviously the lower the ISO, the cleaner image that you'll get out of your camera. But there will be times where, unless you're using lights to light up your subject, you'll need to bump your ISO up. Now, every camera is a bit different. Some cameras are known for having a high ISO range, and it doesn't start to grain your image. So it just depends on what camera you've got. But it's good to play around with it, see how high you can boost your ISO until you start to get a bit of grain in your image. And that's where it's a fine balance. You don't want to push it too far. There is software out there, that I use as well that removes grain from video, and so you can get away with that a little bit.
Bit of noise reduction.
Yeah, a bit of noise reduction and stuff. So yeah, grain or noise. Yep, that's the other word for it. But yeah, it's one of those things where you've just got to be careful with playing with it. If you're shooting outside on a nice day, depending on your camera, you're shooting in 50 or 100 ISO. If you've got a lot of light there, you don't need it. ISO is kind of used in those situations where you don't have the light. So yeah, if you have got the money and you have got, flashes or soft boxes for video, then yeah, try and use those over bumping your ISO, because you always get a cleaner image with a lower ISO range.
It's almost like a last option to some extent, is that you've got all your lighting in check, all your natural lighting, all your settings are all set perfectly. Do I need to bump this slide? Do I need to bump this ISO up? If so, you do it. If it means being able to catch that shot, especially like with weddings and stuff like that, as it starts to get later in the evening, is that you do sometimes tend to find, if you don't end up having the equivalent of like the flash or any of that extra like soft boxes when you're just taking those like evening shots, is that sometimes you do end up having to increase that ISO. But then with that is that you can always just, as what Steve said beforehand, reduce that noise or grain, and then just change it to like a black and white photo. A lot of photographers do that, just because then there's not as much kind of like that graininess look to it, and it's just like a different style that kind of compensates for, hey, I had to crank my ISO up, it was grainy. Yeah. Now it's black and white, and you can't tell as much.
Yeah, and it is a style. Like there's sometimes you're taking a photo with grain in it gives it that vintage kind of look to the image. So yeah, there's different ways of coping with that. But hold on 1 second, I've got a bit of an issue on my end. Sorry, mate. All good. But
this is what I've got to put up with.
Yeah, this is it. Software and tech and everything drops
Steve.
out from time to time. Oh, but yeah, no, mate. I think that's really a good start. I think and that's something that a lot of beginners, don't just you've bought the equipment. Take the time to watch the videos and listen to the podcasts and get your understanding around how to shoot manually, because it just will open up the way you as a photographer develop when you start to learn your tool inside and out. It makes for a big difference, and it means that when you're under certain pressure in certain situations, you can manipulate your camera to capture the best that it can possibly capture. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing to take out of this episode.
Was that? Don't get me wrong. Was that your quick tip?
Quick tip or top tip?
Top tip.
Top tip.
Was that your top tip?
That's my top tip. Yep, definitely.
Perfect.
Definitely.
Awesome,
mate. Well, mate, yeah.
Well, as we said, just get out there, muck around with it, learn the bit of equipment that you have, just get better with it, put yourself in different circumstances, different situations where then you're going to have to tweak things, play with the settings instead of just shooting the exact same way every single time. Experiment, try different angles. Yeah, just get out and about and keep practicing. That's all we can say. So that's pretty much it, Steve.
That's it.
Anything else you want to say?
No, that's really it, mate. Just it's we're only up to now. What's this one? Episode 4, and
Episode 4.
and there's a lot more to come. So, hit that subscribe button for YouTube, but you'll hear us across podcast platforms as well. And yeah, if you like learning about content creating and from photo, video, and everything else in between, then yeah, this is a place to be.
That's it, man. We've got heaps of content coming, and we also got our range of guests that will be coming on board as well. So as we've touched on beforehand, we've got people on the business side of either digital media and creatives. We've got musicians, other photographers, videographers, actors that are making their big break and everything like that. So we've got a lot to come. So stay tuned, and yeah, just do everything that Steve said. That's it. Ring that bell. Hit that button.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, Jordan.
Too easy. Have a fantastic day, guys.